Her first life was quiet and unremarkable, but having been given a second chance, the girl believed that this time everything would be different. That love awaited her, and in fact, a political marriage to a prince who was not even 10 years old. A girl was hiding near one of the columns with a man who didn't understand why she was behaving like that. When he smelled alcohol on her, he finally understood what was causing her behavior. Meanwhile, the servants tried unsuccessfully to find the girl. The man also didn't want anyone to notice him, because if someone found them in such a situation, it would be difficult to explain. So he had no choice but to help the girl. Meanwhile, the girl just wanted a scandal, because if it happened, her wedding would be canceled. Suddenly, one of them tripped, and the girl fell right on top of the man. Continuing to lie on top of her husband, she heard him ask if she was okay. She, who had probably already forgotten that she was lying on her husband, began to admire his face. The man, who had hit the floor hard, asked her to stand up, but she wasn't going to do that, and finally asked him to do her a small favor. While the man didn't understand what she was doing, the girl quickly kissed him. The girl had no idea that this story began in the distant past, and when she came to, she didn't recognize her room. Above her, she saw a worried face calling her by a name unfamiliar to her, Minuette. Even the servants were very happy that their mistress had come to her senses. In fact, the girl's name was Mika Itu, and before these events, she was a designer and workaholic at one of the companies. Thanks to her hard work, she achieved many successes and climbed the career ladder. But Mika had no idea that overwork could cost her life. Therefore, when the girl first opened her eyes, she thought she had entered the afterlife. Meanwhile, the unfamiliar girl, with tears in her eyes, was glad that she had come to her senses. But in a moment, fear appeared on their faces when the girl did not recognize them. The doctor immediately reassured them, explaining that after cardiac arrest, she might lose her memory for a while. The next 2 months passed like this, and she said nothing to every question. But thanks to her owner's frail body, she got used to living calmly, without suspicion. At first, Minuette couldn't even imagine taking someone's place. And despite the fact that she doesn't know what happened to the real girl, she has already managed to adapt to her life. After all, during all this time, she has grown weaned herself from herself and will continue to live as Minuette Levin's daughter. One morning, the maid, as usual, brought breakfast to her mistress. Reina brought the girl her favorite sweets and was glad that she felt happy. Looking at the girl's happy face, she was a little surprised by her quick recovery, knowing how fragile she was. But eventually, she reminded herself that if she had lost her memories, it was her duty to help them return. After a while, Minuette and her parents, who hadn't spent time together in a long time, were having dinner. Their idyll was broken by another girl who looked very much like Minuette. Lillian didn't expect to see her sister well so quickly. She didn't really like tea drinking because it disrupted her diet, which she was unhappy about. The mother immediately scolded Lillian and explained that this was the first time since the girl came to her senses that they had spent time together. Then the woman turned to the man and asked if he had resolved one issue. The girl, not understanding what was being said, looked at her parents with a question in her eyes. The father didn't know where to start, but eventually he noticed that news of the girl's illness had reached the capital, but fortunately, she was fine now. Finally, he added that she had received a marriage proposal from the imperial family. Minuette, who had been lying unconscious a few days ago, was unexpectedly stunned by such changes. Her sister was also very impressed by this proposal, but for different reasons. Even her parents, despite her condition, believed that it was time for their daughter to get married. While that they were discussing this, the girl mentally reflected that their family was so prestigious that they had received an invitation from the imperial family. Her sister didn't see anything unusual in this, as it was just another political wedding. Meanwhile, the parents could not be happy with such a profitable offer for them. Minuette already imagined how she could become empress, and then she would have a luxurious life and never have to work. Meanwhile, His Majesty had just woken up, despite the fact that it was already late. His assistant, who had interrupted his sleep, handed him a newspaper with interesting news. His Majesty was sure that there was nothing there but chatter and some nonsense, but he still took the newspaper. But the man liked to play with him, so he said that if he talked like that, he wouldn't give him any newspapers. In the end, having picked up the newspaper on his own, the man, having started to read, thought that there really was nothing interesting in it. But suddenly, his attention was caught by what he thought was a meaningless headline about an imperial engagement. His assistant explained that every resident of the city was waiting for the imperial wedding, and everyone had been talking about it since morning. But the man, thinking it was uninteresting, simply threw the newspaper away. Aegon explained that he was not one to report baseless rumors. The man didn't believe it was true, because he should have known about this news. But no one had told him anything. But he soon learned from his father that the news of the engagement was true. Because of this, he was very dissatisfied and surprised. His father did not understand his behavior, because as far as he knew, he had no one in mind to marry. He explained that his bride was his eldest daughter, who had recently recovered from a long illness. As he knew, one of the sisters had connections to the imperial family of Troyzen. The man believed that because he had not been recognized as the rightful heir to the country for so long, his father was now trying to define his position as his son. Onyx realized that if they got the empire back, then they would be able to import magic stones and their situation would improve. The man could not help but be pleased with the boy's suggestion, explaining that he had begun to think like a king. But deep down, the man didn't want to get married, because, in his opinion, weddings were nothing more than chains. Onyx knew that their country had many problems that his father had created over a long period of time. He also witnessed events and financial problems in the government. In addition, he knew that marrying into this family would bring their family a lot of money, and he will be forced to use this money to find a way to rebuild their country. Meanwhile, one of the maids was already hurrying to the lady to hand her a beautiful bouquet. The girl, covered in rose petals, did not understand what was happening. Reina reported with a smile on her face that the flowers were sent by the imperial family for the future princess. When the girl examined all the flowers in the room, Minuette asked if they were really all sent to her. While her mistress was suspicious of this, the girl considered the man very generous. But this turned out to be just the beginning, and the very next day, the girl received a bunch of gifts. And the very next day, they finally received a formal proposal from the prince. And finally, a day later, they were eagerly awaiting the portrait. After all, Minuette had never seen her fiancé before, so she was eager to see him, at least in a photo. But when she saw the image of the little boy, the girl could not hold back her words to express her indignation. Continuing to look at the boy's face, she thought that her fiancé would be ugly in appearance, but she never expected it to be a child. The man explained that it was an old portrait of His Majesty, which calmed the girl down a bit. In fact, it was the only portrait of His Majesty available, but the man explained that it was the one in which he looked most attractive. But the girl was nervous and could no longer think about anything beyond her husband's age. After all, the girl was even ready to accept death from overwork or waking up in someone else's body, but she did not want to accept marriage with a child. But as it turned out, this portrait was not the only thing the man had to deliver. Opening the box, the man explained that these were the prince's favorite sweets. But Minuette saw this as just a one-way ticket to the path of childcare. She couldn't even understand how this could be acceptable to society. A few days later, the girl was relaxing, reading the newspaper, and suddenly saw an interesting article. She expressed her indignation by returning the portrait to show that she had given it some thought. Her sister, upon hearing this news, already imagined what the prince would think if he read about it. But in the end, Lillian asked what exactly the girl didn't like, because the prince was one of the best matches for her. But the girl was not convinced of this, because she believed that it was impossible to fall in love with a child. Sometime after a long illness, she finally went to the store to update her wardrobe. Once inside, she was no less struck by the beauty of the dresses. The girls have already prepared several luxurious dresses, especially for her. The sister, not understanding the girl's reaction, asked her to sit down and calm down. And finally, Minuette asked what kind of dress she wanted to buy. She had never thought about it, and it was no wonder that she was unable to attend her own ball during her illness, and wondered if it would be okay to join her sister's ball. And she wondered if it was too late for her to attend her first ball. The girl agreed with her, but also added that it was impossible because she was unconscious. Trying to distract her sister, Lillian reminded her of the ball and chose the best dress so that she could outshine everyone. Continuing to walk through the store, she remembered what family she came from. Meanwhile, the girl could not admire every dress. Her sister took it calmly, knowing how beautiful her sister was. After some time, after buying a few more outfits, her sister invited her to have tea in the city. Minuette was still a little unaccustomed to such a life, so she was surprised every time she saw the luxury in which she lived. Unlike her sister, whom everyone already knew and even called by name. And the girl noticed that this very person Lillian was talking to had been watching them earlier. The girl waited for a while they both exchanged pleasantries. Delaying his reaction, the man nevertheless noticed the presence of another girl and asked who she was. Lillian was a little indignant at such a tactless question, so she explained in an offended tone that it was her sister. The man apologized and explained that he had heard rumors that she had recovered, but he didn't fully believe them. When the man began to flatter the girl so openly, her sister was a little offended by such behavior. The man immediately tried to calm her down and said that there was no one nicer than her. Remembering that he had something to tell her, the man asked Lillian to go with him. The girl remembered what she had asked the boy for and was very pleased with what he had done for her. After that, as if nothing had happened, they left the girl alone. Watching them, Minuette became very sad because she also wanted to fall in love. After all, her parents were pressuring her and asking her to at least agree to the engagement. Suddenly, she heard a conversation between people talking about a lord who was only 10 years old. They discussed him without shame and imagined his future married life if he got married now. The girl was very upset by these rumors because she remembered that she could become the same wife, but in reality, she would only be a nanny for the child. Hearing that the prince was still being sung lullabies and that he had a personal tutor, she realized that she would have to take on this role, which she really didn't want to do. After that, they began to discuss that the imperial family itself created rumors about the wedding in order to earn money for information, and only then make an official announcement. One of the women believed that, despite the difficult financial situation, selling information about the prince was unwise. In addition, another woman had information that they didn't even have enough candles in the palace. Minuette, of course, knew about her husband's age, but she also had no idea about the financial difficulties she had not expected. Therefore, she was very unhappy because, in addition to having to babysit the child, she could also find herself in a difficult financial situation. Suddenly, His Majesty and his assistant entered the place where the girl was drinking tea. When the girl saw the man, she dreamed that she would definitely fall in love with him and wanted him to become her husband. So she called one of the waitresses and asked her to bring tea to the table where the man was sitting. While the man was trying to eat, he was disturbed by his assistant's laughter, and finally he couldn't stand it anymore and asked him to shut up. Calming down a little, Aegon began to talk about the wedding again. In addition, he was amused by the behavior of the girl, who, in his opinion, did not want to marry him because she sent the portrait back. The man continued to laugh at the boy, even when the boy grabbed him by the collar. Calming down, Aegon said that he felt sorry for the girl who had become the target of this scandal. In the newspaper, the man read that the article was written by none other than the Blue Cicada. The man couldn't believe that everyone believed a journalist who had become famous for his gossip and false news. But he knew that if this news got into the newspapers, he could get even more support from the council. The man remembered that Cecilia was not there because she always accompanied him when he left the palace. Therefore, the assistant assumed that she was simply shocked that he proposed to the girl without saying a word to her herself. As he sipped his tea, Onyx didn't feel the need to report every detail of the royal affair. Aegon reminded her that Cecilia was the younger sister of a famous man. The man knew without him that Cecilia Blanchard was the youngest sister of Pedrick Blanchard, but that was not a good reason to announce his plans. Aegon explained that if the wedding was only a princely duty for him, then why shouldn't he grant her the title of princess? Tired of this idle chatter, and setting his cup on the table, he asked Aegon to be quiet. After all, he, like no one else, should have known about his family's financial difficulties, but the assistant stood his ground and reminded him that he should pay at least a little attention to her. Trying to stop him, Onyx asked how long he was going to continue living, killing himself with work. The man didn't have time to answer anything, as a girl approached them and brought tea that another girl had ordered for them. Looking back cautiously, the man assumed that this was Minuette Levine. He couldn't understand what the girl was thinking when she sent him tea. Meanwhile, the girl herself regretted her decision, considering it absurd, because such things only happen in fairy tales. But she reminded herself that in a past life, she was a workaholic. So now she definitely wants to find her love. After a while of staring at each other like that, their eyes finally met. While the girl was trying to please him, the man didn't understand what she was doing, because she herself had refused the engagement. So, without saying a word or even smiling, Onyx stood up from the table. When the girl realized that he was heading her way, she began to worry. As he got closer, he decided to ask if she had ordered tea for them. Minuette confirmed his assumption and immediately remarked that it was a bit rude of her. Much to her surprise, the man said it was nothing compared to what she had done to him before. The girl who saw him for the first time didn't understand what he was talking about at all. Meanwhile, her husband continued to insult her, believing that it was her hobby to play with men like toys. Suddenly, Minuette noticed that the newspaper she had recently been reading was peeking out of his pocket. So she quickly snatched it from his hands, hoping that her husband hadn't finished reading it yet. And leaving him surprised by this situation, the girl quickly ran away. The man's assistant could not help but be surprised by the naivety of this girl, who had only recently recovered from an illness. But, seeing Onyx's bad mood, he asked him not to worry and promised to give his newspaper instead of the one the girl had stolen. After that, he continued talking about the girl, and when he saw how beautiful she was, he understood why all the residents were talking about her. Meanwhile, the girl lay dejectedly in her bed, hugging her pillow. She was very upset by the article, which seemed to have ruined her entire life. Reina entered her room and she ordered her to gather all the newspapers. Spreading them out on the bed, the girl couldn't understand where they got the information about her refusal of engagement, because she had never officially refused anyone before. The maid explained that there was nothing strange about this. While Minuette was reading an article about herself, the maid remarked that she couldn't stand the newspaper, but couldn't help but notice how beautifully the girl was portrayed. When the girl asked why her face was in the newspaper, the maid explained that drawing portraits of members of the royal family without permission was indeed a crime. Not understanding why she deserved such a fate, the girl could not stand it and, hugging her maid, began to cry. Trying to calm the lady, Reina reminded her that this was just gossip that would soon be forgotten. Taking her hands, she explained that once she married the prince, everyone would realize that it was a lie. Hearing these words, Minuette realized that if she had not officially refused, it meant that the engagement was still valid. And after that, she started crying even harder, because if she didn't marry the royal prince, they would continue to gossip about her. Even though the man was at work, he couldn't get the girl's behavior out of his head. Eventually, he realized that he needed to focus on his work, as he would have to explain the effects of the magic stones. And it was at this moment that his father asked what results they had achieved in communicating with the peoples who had large reserves of the magic stone. Onyx reported that everything is going well, and they expect a stable supply of imported resources soon. He added that according to the experiments on the utilization of magic stones, they have completed the second phase of testing, and when the third phase is completed, they will send the documents to the government. The man wondered if improving the productivity of their industrialization would be effective. He knew he needed a specific number, but he decided to ask anyway. In the end, they answered that it takes approximately 50,000 hours of human labor to process 45 kilograms of raw cotton. But if you use a machine charged with a magic stone, it will take 25 times less time. After the meeting, a tired Onyx took a walk with his assistant, who believed he had succeeded. Walking further, the men unexpectedly saw Cecilia in front of them. The girl immediately bowed and said that it was a great joy for her to see Prince Onyx. She explained that she was here on business and still decided to drop by to convey her greetings. Taking the opportunity, she decided to invite them both to a ball that would be held in her honor. After all, she had heard rumors that he wanted to find a partner by the end of this year. Aegon hinted that it was thanks to some that he worked day and night. Besides, it was Cecilia's first ball, which he didn't want to miss. But the girl still wanted to see the prince, so she asked that if he came to the ball, he would let her have the first dance with him. The man apologized and explained that he was going to return home after he finished his speech. Then the girl decided to directly ask if his behavior was due to the fact that he was engaged. She also added whether he is doing this because her brother is keeping him at a distance from her, or because she is his cousin. And she added that in royal families, there is nothing strange about marrying cousins, especially since they are not related by blood. Onyx politely apologized and said he regretted what happened in the past, but there were no feelings between them. The girl was upset by his words, because even she didn't want to become a princess without love, and the only thing she wanted was love from her brother Onyx. So she decided to ask if he was in love with his fiancé, to whom he was engaged. Patting her on the head, the boy asked if it would make her feel better if he confirmed her words. So he asked the upset girl not to argue with him about it anymore and to try to understand him. After all, he knew that sooner or later, Cecilia would hate him if he was constantly around her. But the man did not notice that from now on, she was no longer his younger sister, who knew nothing about this world. Aegon, who watched the girl's emotions with sadness on his face, sincerely felt sorry for her. But pulling herself together, the girl apologized for her behavior and suggested that he just have tea at the ball. Onyx initially wanted to politely decline, saying that there were many people willing to have tea with her. The girl, who dreamed every day that her husband would finally choose her, decided not to say it out loud and to agree with his words. And finally came the first debut ball, which was much more magnificent than the previous one. The girls discussed the beauty of the ball and the latest gossip. The men were also eagerly awaiting the appearance of the girl, about whom the newspapers had been constantly writing recently. And finally, Minuette arrived with her sister, who felt confident, unlike her. As soon as they entered, all eyes were on them. Cecilia also longed to see the girl to whom the man was engaged, because no one had ever seen her face before. For many, it was their first ball, and they didn't like the girl because all the attention was focused on her, not them. So they began discussing the scandalous article about Minuette, who had broken off her engagement. Looking at her, who had been on the verge of death just a few days ago, they did not think that such a wife would suit a prince. Lillian, who had overheard the gossip about her sister, finally couldn't stand it anymore and approached them. After that, she decided to personally introduce her sister, saying that she hoped they would become friends. Hinting that they already knew many details about her personal life, she noticed how the girls immediately began to hide their faces behind their fans. Lillian added that this was her sister's first outing into the world after her illness, and that she was very happy if everyone took care of her. By hinting at their gossip, she brought one of the girls to the point where she couldn't stand it anymore and asked directly what she meant. Her friend immediately supported her, saying that it was a very loud statement and that, besides, her debut could be ruined. The girl smiled at their remarks, because those who were themselves engaged in gossip dared to talk about vulgarity. Then Lillian asked directly if it was gossip that she had turned down the engagement to the prince. Lillian, who wanted to protect her sister, also decided to ask them an unpleasant question. She asked if any of them were dating a prince and whose heart would be broken if he married her sister. At this point, Cecilia interrupted their conversation, suggesting that they not continue the argument as it was inappropriate to discuss it at a ball. Noticing how one of the girls blushed, Minuette realized that she was the one who was secretly in love with the royal prince. She wondered why the prince had proposed to marry her if he had a wealthy girlfriend in love with him. Meanwhile, the girl could barely contain her anger at Liliana, because she herself was from a famous family and should be treated like a future princess. But she only thought about it, and out loud, she simply apologized for her rudeness. After that, she gently hinted to her friends that they should also stop arguing and follow her. While Minuette tried to convince her sister that she was fine, she couldn't understand how they could feign elegance so skillfully. Leland was also angry at her sister, who wouldn't be able to say anything if she were left alone, and reminded her that she wouldn't always be able to be there to protect her. Meanwhile, the men had their banquet, over which they discussed matters. Their conversation also touched on Minuette's family. They were struck by her sister's beauty, and some even wanted to dance with her. Onyx, who was also present, listened to their conversation with interest. Among them was a man who had recently been with a girl in a cafe and was sure that she was completely in love with him because he had put a lot of effort into it. But he had not expected to see Lady Minuette at this ball, especially after the scandal in the newspaper. Mentioning Onyx's presence, one of the men asked how his engagement was progressing. The man made it clear briefly and clearly that they were not immune to this. Those who knew about his financial difficulties understood the cause of his anger. In addition, men could not help but admire the girl's beauty. Onyx also could not deny her beauty, but believed that she was nothing more than a shell that would fade over time. This made him wonder again why she had decided to break off the engagement. While he was thinking about it, other men were making vulgar comments about the girl and her appearance. Hearing these words, the man began to despise them even more for such vulgarity. Onyx asked one of them to be quiet, but despite the request, he continued to say what he thought. Then he tried to calm him down again, noting that he should be more careful with alcohol. But Onyx couldn't stand it and began to express everything he thought, noting that with a face like his, no lady would even want to look at him, and suggested that he come to the next ball to find a bride. After that, he sharply hit the man, and he lost his footing and fell. Meanwhile, the dancing began, and those present could not help but notice how wonderfully Lillian danced. So even other debutantes admitted that she was the brightest this year. But eventually, everyone remembered her sister again, and the gossip about the broken engagement. There were also rumors that she barely received an education due to illness and, in addition, dared to refuse the imperial family. The girl, who had prepared for such conversations in advance, could barely contain her emotions. After all, she didn't expect that they would gossip about her so openly. Seeing the waiter with drinks, she suddenly called him over and drank all the glasses of drinks. Immediately regretting it, she asked where the terrace was. Not wanting to stay in this place any longer, she decided to leave on her own. Meanwhile, Cecilia tried to find her brother Onyx with her eyes, with whom she wanted to dance. Her mother approached her and reminded her that she should be more open in order to please most people. Not wanting to spend time with anyone but Onyx, the girl continued to look for him. Seeing Aegon, she decided that this was also a good option and explained that she wanted to spend some time with him. Onyx's assistant, who was also looking for him, suggested that he might have simply returned home. He said that he would enjoy spending time with her, but Cecilia didn't quite understand what he was saying, because he was her dance teacher. So, approaching one of the servants, the girl asked to find the prince before the second waltz began. Meanwhile, Minuette finally reached the terrace, holding onto the wall to keep from falling. Despite her condition, she couldn't help but notice that everyone was looking for the crown prince. Imagine her surprise when, without even suspecting it, she found him. Not knowing that a prince was standing before her, she, just like in the cafe, was enchanted by his beauty. Minuette realized that this was her second chance, given to her by God, to meet her love. Alcohol gave her courage, and she realized that she had nothing to lose, so she decided to act openly. After all, to win love, you need to act openly. So she decided to be the first to start the conversation. The man, believing he was alone, did not expect to see his bride in front of him. While the girl tried to remind him that they had met at the cafe, Onyx tried to keep his distance from her. To all his requests to stay away, she, on the contrary, approached him and repeated that they had already met in a cafe. While the girl was trying to formulate her thoughts, she suddenly grabbed his face with both hands. After that, the man, not holding back his emotions, abruptly removed her hands from his face. Meanwhile, the waiters and servants were already looking for the prince. Hearing that the prince was being sought, Minuette realized that she would not want him to be seen here with her, so she immediately started pushing him to one of the corners, not wanting them to be noticed. The man, who no longer understood what she was thinking, simply watched in silence. After all, it was she who had offended him by refusing his offer, and now she was so determined to spend time with him, so he couldn't take it anymore, started yelling, and finally asked what she wanted from him. But the girl who had behaved so boldly before couldn't even formulate her opinion. Her next question, whether they knew each other at all, drove him mad, and he wondered how long she was going to keep up this masquerade. After all, she couldn't help but know what he looked like, so he assumed that her behavior was due to alcohol. Hearing again that he was being sought, the man realized that this time he would have to team up with the girl to get out of this situation. But due to her drunken state, Minuette tripped and fell right on top of him. Like a true gentleman, Onyx immediately inquired about her well-being. Continuing to lie on top of her husband, the girl acted as if nothing had happened. And after that, she finally remembered that her husband might know about her from gossip in the newspapers. And continuing to make excuses, the man wondered whether this girl had any shame. Finally, realizing that enough was enough, he asked her to get off him. But the girl was not going to give up so easily and realized that this might be her only chance. After all, if she starts an affair with another man, everyone will forget about that article about the wedding in the newspaper. Approaching her husband as close as possible, Minuette confessed that she did not want to marry the prince, and if she had a choice, she would marry someone else. Embarrassed by her behavior, Onyx wondered why she was telling him all this. The girl probably didn't understand what she was doing or saying, so she asked him for a favor. The man, despite all his desire, could not refuse the girl, because she was very persistent in her actions. Before the man could realize that she was going to kiss him, the girl asked him out, and immediately after that, she quickly kissed her husband. The next thing the girl remembered was how she recovered in her room, not understanding what had happened to her. The maid, who could not believe that her mistress had been able to drink so much alcohol in her condition, asked how she was feeling, but the news that Minuette had fallen asleep in the imperial carriage quickly brought the girl to her senses. After all, the last thing the girl remembered was that she decided to leave the ball so as not to see other ladies who were gossiping about her. Minuette was afraid of doing something wrong around members of the imperial family, while Reina was outraged that the girl didn't remember anything at all. Therefore, she immediately began to reproach the girl for such behavior. But, fortunately, she ended up in the imperial carriage, and not in the hands of some scoundrels. But the girl would feel better if a stranger helped her than the imperial family. And it was at this moment that her sister burst into the room. Lillian was outraged by her sister's behavior, who simply disappeared from the ball, and then it turned out that she had been personally delivered by the imperial carriage. And after that, she handed her today's newspaper, in which the journalist did not fail to notice her. But still, opening the newspaper, the girl found even more interesting news, namely that Lillian became the queen of this season. Suddenly, all three of them heard strange sounds coming from outside. The maid immediately went to the window to check what was happening, but when she saw this, she froze in place. Then the sister looked out the window and saw Rena asking people to line up and wait their turn. One of the men, who considered himself special, did not want to stand in line, but the maid ordered him to do so. Meanwhile, all three had already gone out onto the balcony and continued watching together. The maid, seeing that their eyes were directed in one place, ordered them not to look at the second floor, as this was disrespectful to the lady. Lillian believed that all these people under the windows came for her because she had become very popular. Minuette, who thought that she had done something yesterday and that these people had come to her, did not even expect that they had gathered to meet her sister. The maid explained that she had never seen anything like this before, but everyone knew that the one who became the queen of the ball received the attention of all the men who were ready to die to catch her eye. But the maid was upset because it meant that along with this attention, women would also appear, unhappy that someone had managed to overshadow them. Realizing that Minuette might be thinking of herself, the maid immediately explained that she wasn't referring to her. But the girl was indifferent to this, strangely enough, even though the other girls might feel dislike for her, considering everything that had happened. After all, her head was in complete disarray right now, and she didn't know what to do. So, Minuette decided to warn the maid that she would first go get some fresh air, although she didn't like the idea because there were so many people outside. As she descended the stairs, the girl couldn't shake the thought that her greatest duty was the wedding, and she realized that she had failed her mission. When she went out into the garden, she didn't realize how she found herself in an unfamiliar place. After crossing the fence, the girl could not believe her eyes. An incredible beauty opened before her, and the beauty, in her opinion, was the thickets of weeds, the uneven ground, and the neglected pond. Looking around, Minuette guessed that this was an abandoned part of the garden, but at the same time, she thought that it could make a perfect landscape for a drawing. Besides, it was the perfect place to hide from strangers. After that, she decided to remember her past life and try to work a little again. But she realized in time that she didn't even have a computer to draw the drawings. However, right in front of her, she saw a perfect branch that could also be used to draw something. As soon as she picked up the branch, she immediately began to draw with enthusiasm. Soon she had a schematic drawing of the place. Minuette even felt relieved, because the work helped her to distract herself a little. And then she realized she could go home and get some pens and paper. But so that no one would destroy her perfect drawing on the ground, she decided to cover it with stones. However, this place had been abandoned for a long time, and no one had come here. After a while, she realized that 10 days had already passed since she started her project. She decided to move one of the stones and give it a specific name. Her inspiration was hindered by the dress, which was uncomfortable every time she tried to do something. Then Minuette remembered her maid's warning that if she came back with a dirty dress again, she would go out with her, and she realized that she should be careful. So today, she still brought an apron with her, and, putting it on over her dress, she was choosing where to start. But her enthusiasm didn't last long, and she realized that she couldn't handle everything on her own. However, she remembered that she couldn't give up so easily, and tried again. But this attempt was also unsuccessful, and suddenly she saw the faces of unfamiliar maids above her. The girl, who thought no one came here, asked who they were. And later she saw a woman who also wanted to ask her the same question. The girl took her hand to help her get up. And she was very surprised when she found out that this garden belonged to this woman. The girl was very upset, because she believed that the woman would order everything to be returned to the way it was before her arrival, and all her efforts would be in vain. The woman decided to ask about the girl's name, because she realized that she was not from a simple family. Hearing her name, the woman remembered that that was the name of the eldest daughter of a famous family. As expected, gossip that Minuette was very sick and could not get out of bed reached her, so it was no wonder that she could not even move a stone. It was pointless to ask how the girl found the entrance to this garden, because the woman had already seen the open gate of the fence. Realizing that she had not yet introduced herself, she introduced herself as Violetta, wife of the Earl of Crawley. The girl was quite surprised by the woman's personality, because she knew that she held one of the highest positions in society. While the girl was trying to recover from the shock, Violetta asked what a young unmarried girl was doing here without the accompaniment of a maid. Minuette couldn't answer anything meaningful, because she didn't know whether to tell the truth. While the girl was searching for something to answer, the woman couldn't help but notice how the garden, which had been unremarkable to everyone, had become truly beautiful. After that, the woman didn't need any more answers, because she realized that the girl was attached to the garden. In addition, the Countess asked if the girl had really redone everything here herself. Realizing that there was no point in lying anymore, Minuette decided to tell the whole truth. She immediately began to apologize for doing everything without permission, because she really liked this garden. But, to the girl's great surprise, the woman didn't even get angry, but on the contrary, offered her to officially take care of the garden. Without waiting for an answer, the woman said that it would be difficult for Minuette to do everything alone, so she would give her a couple of maids to help. Trying to figure out if this was a dream, the girl asked if she was really ready to trust her. Violetta noticed that the girl had a talent for this, but still had doubts, because she offered the job to a representative of a famous family. However, the girl's enthusiasm could no longer be stopped, and she agreed to the job. The woman promised to pay a good salary and said that if she needed anything, she should contact her. Meanwhile, the girl's maid was almost at a loss for words, trying to find her. Suddenly, the maids brought a newspaper, which again contained unpleasant gossip about her mistress. But the girl herself was not much concerned about this news, because she didn't care. Minuette devoted herself entirely to the garden of the woman into whose close circle she had now entered. Despite the already large amount of work done, Minuette didn't even think about stopping. In a past life, she was a workaholic who hated to stop and only calmed down after achieving a result. But now, every small change seemed like a real miracle to her. She carefully selected flowers that would suit the garden and ordered them. She even consulted with her assistants on how best to plant them. She was embarrassed that she was causing them extra trouble, but to the maids it was only a small matter. On the contrary, since the woman's husband died, the palace had lost all its color, and now it finally shone again. She had noticed more than once that as soon as the girl was in the garden, Violetta's expression became softer. And at that very moment, a woman appeared in sight and invited them to take a break and drink some tea. But Minuette learned that Mr. Miller had personally brought flowers for her garden, so she decided to have tea a little later. The woman was always surprised by the girl's behavior, because it was not typical for her to run around the garden. Minuette was so busy that she didn't even notice as she ran past her sister. And it was at this moment that Lillian met Lady Violetta, whom she had not seen for a long time. The girl decided to visit her as soon as she found out she had returned, but she could never have imagined that her sister would do it before her. She couldn't help but ask about her well-being after her husband's death. But even to her great surprise, the girl noticed that the woman was starting to feel quite well. Not wanting the attention to be focused on her, the Countess decided to inquire about the girl's news, because she had heard that she had become the queen of the ball. The maid explained that whenever she brought the newspapers, Madame did not read any of them, not even the articles about high society. The woman had no intention of reading them, because she considered it irresponsible to believe everything written in the newspaper. Therefore, Lillian decided that from now on, she would tell her all the information about what was happening in the world. Remembering that she had seen her sister, she decided to ask what she had forgotten in this palace, because as far as she knew, her sister rarely went out and was very shy. Violetta briefly explained that she helps her with the garden. This surprised Lillian very much, because she would never have thought that her shy older sister could be fond of gardening, considering it only a consequence of her illness. Moving smoothly into a discussion of her family, Lillian couldn't help but express her indignation at the delay in the engagement. The woman, who didn't read the news at all, had no idea what was going on between them. And looking at the newspaper again, the woman could not believe that all this gossip was written about Minuette. During their conversation, the girl was accepting a delivery of flowers from a man who was trying to grow them in water, as she had requested. And while he was explaining this, a curious boy appeared from the cart. He said frantically that his father was trembling with fear because the girl was very picky. Minuette realized that she had written too many details, but still, she was glad that the man did as she asked, and said that she would count on him next time too. While he was listening to the flattery, the maid had already counted the money and held out her hands to him. At first, the man decided to refuse, saying it was too much, but the maid was very persistent. Meanwhile, the girl, deciding not to waste time, was already decorating the pond. After all, as soon as she first entered the garden, it occurred to her to decorate the pond with lilies, and she finally realized this idea. Suddenly, frightened maids came running to her, unable to allow the lady to carry the burden. Meanwhile, Onyx was walking nearby, having been in a bad mood since morning, due to the fact that he kept hearing the same name wherever he went. The name still belonged to Minuette's sister, but the man generally saw everyone as the Levin family. It was her name that had been on the man's mind since morning, and he could not forget her beauty. He couldn't explain the reason for his shaking, whether it was because of the lady's low behavior in the press or because of Griff's prank. After all, he himself understood perfectly well that the man's words, although they sounded less polite, were the truth. Besides, he couldn't forget the strange behavior of the drunk girl, which he thought was intentional, and it stuck in his head for the whole day. But as soon as he closed his eyes, he remembered the girl's facial features, her smile, every part of her body. The girl reminded him of a combination of sweet strawberries, wine, and whiskey that caused instant paralysis. Thinking about this, the man seriously considered trying this drink and distributing it. And unexpectedly for himself, he finally met the one who had been stuck in his head all day. Watching Minuette tidy up the garden, the man really didn't understand why she couldn't just calmly enter the wedding hall and be happy that she was marrying the prince. And yet, Onyx thought the girl was deliberately setting up all the meetings with him, and even this time, he thought she was up to something. And at that moment, a headline about a guide for modern women on how to find their love appeared before his eyes, and he didn't understand why it had stuck in his head. He saw in the girl's behavior how she demonstrated methods copied straight from a romantic novel. He continued to ponder what the girl's next move would be, and did not notice that she had seen him. Still not knowing that he was a prince, the girl was delighted with his appearance. Onyx just pointedly turned away, believing that she wouldn't be able to play the script with him, as is usually the case in romantic novels, because he was a prince. Meanwhile, Minuette tried her best to attract the attention of the boy, who was deliberately not reacting to her presence. As the girl walked towards him, she didn't notice how she tripped and, losing her balance due to the boxes of flowers in her hands, began to fall. She couldn't hold the box, so all the lilies scattered across the pond. And the girl herself found herself next to the prince again. The man was irritated because he thought he had fallen into her trap again, and she had fallen on purpose so he could save her. After all, every meeting with the girl reminded the man of a romantic novel that Cecilia read very often. Meanwhile, Minuette continued to hold on to her husband and watch the pond with fascination. Onyx would still have thought she was deliberately trying to attract attention if the girl hadn't pushed him away, so he wouldn't get in her way. She immediately ran to the lilies, afraid that something would happen to them after the fall. A maid immediately ran up to her, suggesting that she pick the lilies herself because she had soiled her dress. The man, realizing that no one was paying attention to him, decided to make his presence known. The girl decided to say hello to him again, as if nothing had happened. After all, the man couldn't deny that he remembered her from last time. Taking one of the flowers from his hands, she thanked him for his help. At this moment, the man subconsciously realized that the girl had once again used the third rule, namely, to let the man perform the feat. While Onyx was thinking about it, the girl decided that it would be a good idea to introduce herself during their third meeting. Looking at her, Onyx was in a state of intoxication from wine. He was confused and tried to blame his emotions on a chance meeting with a girl. But most of all, the man was fascinated by the girl's sweet smile, knowing that she could cause him a lot of problems. And trying to convince himself otherwise, the guy tried to believe that this was just a trick of the girl. Minuette, who was completely in love with the man, could not understand his strange behavior, so she became upset every time. Meanwhile, the guy couldn't deny that he himself had fallen into this ridiculous trap, because, in his opinion, it was a terrible scenario. But in the end, the man realized that it didn't matter, because her family would significantly improve his financial situation. So for the first time in a long time, Onyx finally introduced himself to the girl, still assuming that she already knew his name. And before the girl had time to do or say anything, he decided to say a quick goodbye. The girl was so enchanted by their meeting that she didn't even realize that he had called her fiancé's name. So she decided to ask her husband how often he went to the garden. Scratching the back of his head, the man said that as far as he knew, he would come more often now, and the next time would be tomorrow. As Minuette kept asking what time it was, the man couldn't understand how she could consider Onyx a gentleman. The girl could no longer think about anything else but their meeting tomorrow. The next morning, the maid, struggling to find the right words as she combed her hair, asked to be honest with her. As expected, she was very interested in where her lady went every day. During the conversation, Rena muttered frantically that she wished the lady was at least a little like her sister. But realizing how strange it sounded, the girl asked to pay no attention to her words. After all, she immediately remembered that a few days ago she had wished Minuette would stand on both legs, and now she was scolding her for the fact that it often didn't happen. Watching the joyful face, the girl wondered if something joyful had happened. She decided to ask herself if she really enjoyed tending to the garden. Minuette didn't know what to say because she couldn't explain that she had met the lady and was now taking care of her garden. But the maid asked her to be careful even within the palace, because her sister had many visitors, and not all of them were true gentlemen. The girl was indifferent to the conversation until she heard that men could hide their real names. In addition, she noted that this could lead to a broken engagement with the prince. But the girl was indifferent to the engagement because she realized that the man could have lied about his name. In addition, he did not give his last name, so she could not find out where his family came from. To ease her conscience, Minuette decided to ask the maid if hiding one's last name always meant something bad. The maid, who had seen a lot in life, confirmed that there are imposters who wear expensive clothes and jewelry, and sometimes steal. She immediately explained that a well-dressed man did not always mean he belonged to a noble family. She continued to scare the girl, saying that the easiest way for such people to obtain a title was to marry an innocent lady who knew nothing about the world. Meanwhile, Onyx strolled around his estate and did his work. He was reading a newspaper about his magic stone business. And of course, his attention was drawn to what he thought was the childish title of the article. He dreamed of traveling the world with his uncles and aunts, and it was one aunt who remarked that if he hadn't become a prince, he would hardly have lived as a businessman. Looking at the lilies, he assumed that his aunt had returned from her trip. In addition, lilies were associated with a recent encounter with an obsessive girl. Onyx still regretted that he had only given his name because he wanted to say his title. Continuing to read the newspaper, the man could not understand why he decided to act together with the girl who pretended not to know who the prince of the empire was. And it was at this moment that he heard the scream of a rather familiar girl, and turning around, was confirmed in his suspicions. Minuette tried to warn him, warning that he might hurt his leg. And looking ahead, the man saw a broken vase, which could hurt him if he took even one more step. Watching the girl carefully collect the debris, the man could not understand how and where she appeared. Smiling at her behavior, the man only wanted to build contact, because he lacked words for a woman who creates scenarios without rest at every moment. Every meeting they had ended awkwardly, and the man couldn't even fathom the girl's plans, because her actions made it impossible. And even today, he didn't expect such a situation, and especially since he always felt lost around this girl, and did things that were uncharacteristic of him, he wanted to see her as little as possible. Wanting to leave the girl behind, Onyx wanted to leave, but she grabbed his leg so he couldn't do it. The husband, of course, had heard that she had missed wedding lessons due to illness, but he didn't expect that she didn't know basic etiquette. The man promised to compensate her for the pot, which is only sold in a certain store. But the girl was not happy about this because it was not about compensation at all. She explained that Mr. Kirkel had only come yesterday, and she had barely persuaded him to choose this pot. And this time, she did not want to call him again. The man also found it strange, because for ordinary workers, there was nothing like bringing goods for a respected family. Meanwhile, Minuette herself did not understand what she was talking about, because she again began to talk about some nonsense. The presence of the man she loves made her realize that Mika still lives inside, which is why dating was a very difficult topic for her. Therefore, the girl explained to the surprised husband that she was responsible for all the decorations in this garden. The man finally understood why she was always near his grandmother's garden, and now he realized the reasons. But the girl was no ordinary person. She belonged to a respected family, and therefore it was strange for her status to simply take care of the garden. The girl immediately explained that she doesn't do everything alone, because Violetta provided her with people to help her, and besides, she only deals with design. But the man could hardly believe that a lady could so easily soil her dress while decorating the garden. After observing her behavior for several days, Onyx finally realized that there was truth in her words. But still, he decided to ask why she was doing this and asked if she remembered whose daughter she was. And he decided to ask why a lady from such a noble family was particularly fond of decorating the garden, as if nothing had happened. As Onyx pondered the fact that she had been able to create such a scheme to see him more often, he realized that this was an ideal quality for a princess, and the girl was glad that her husband would compensate her for the loss. The man confirmed her words, saying that if he didn't have enough money right now, he would send someone to her estate. But Minuette reminded him that she too was from a noble family and had her own means. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the girl asked if the man had ridden a horse, and this question surprised him greatly. Confirming her words, the husband heard the following. She asked him to take her to the store so that it would cover the reimbursement for the flower pot. The man, who thought she would try to sell the flower pot for the highest price, realized that she just wanted to take a walk together. And knowing what articles were written about her in the newspapers, he couldn't understand how she could not think about it. Continuing to watch and wait for the girl's question, the man again assumed that this was part of her cunning plan. He wondered if walking together for just one flower pot wasn't too small a price to pay. Minuette was outraged by this question and explained that it wasn't just a flower pot, because besides that, it had taken up her time and effort, so she decided she might as well take up his time too. After that, the man had no choice but to simply fulfill the girl's request. Soon she returned with a package in her hands from Mr. He asked her to contact him in the future, and he would personally visit the palace so as not to cause her any problems. Meanwhile, the street was full of people, and the girl, who very rarely went outside her home, was fascinated and looked around. Meanwhile, the man continued to wonder if such work, namely garden decoration, was suitable for a lady. The girl just laughed at his words and noted that there was no rule that a lady had to do nothing. Onyx immediately found proof of her words when he saw that her dress was stained. So he complimented her for the first time, noting that she was a very modern woman. And he even confirmed that it was a compliment because she was different from other ladies who wanted to appear in newspapers and gossip next to his name. But apart from that, Minuette had an advantage. She was a desired daughter from a respected family, and that caused admiration. Seeing her smile, the man again assumed that this was a deliberately created perfect scheme. Meanwhile, the girl decided that if they were here, she offered to buy them both lunch. The man didn't answer her question, suggesting that the next step would be to go to a restaurant. But like a true gentleman, he said he would treat her, and upon realizing this, he realized he had been outwitted again. And despite himself, he took her to the restaurant without resistance to save the lady, who assured him that she worked to live. But he soon regretted his decision when he saw how big the girl's appetite was, and realized that people would start gossiping that Count Levin was starving, or that the food at her house is so extravagant that this offer was like a breath of fresh air. Minuetta explained that trying new food is also a feeling of pleasure. She decided to ask if this was part of the fun when people travel abroad. Onyx was very surprised by her question, because despite the fact that her parents were diplomats, the only way a woman could travel abroad was in the company of her husband. The girl, who didn't know this, continued to try new foods and describe them to her husband. But after hearing that he didn't like the process of eating, She realized that because of this, his life had become less fun. So she decided to explain that life is more fun by trying something delicious, buying new things, and would have continued the discussion if her husband hadn't interrupted her. Onyx decided to wonder if life as a lady of the Levin family should also bring joy. And besides, he couldn't help but wonder about the reason for her refusal to be engaged to the imperial family. While the man could not look at her face to ask his question, the girl thought silently because she believed that saying such things to a stranger was pointless. The girl explained that in her opinion, it is pointless to waste your second life living without love. Hearing the girl's words about love, he even imagined that the horses in the stables would snort at her words. He suggested that she should have learned about each family's finances before speaking to him, and thus again noted that a very interesting lady was sitting before him. Meanwhile, Minuette continued to say that she never had the chance to date in her past life. The girl herself didn't understand why she continued to talk about it and be frank with this man. After all, regardless of whether he laughs at her words, she wants to tell him that she is actually a different person. The man, knowing nothing about her life, noticed that she was very unusual, and whether she divided her life into before and after the illness. The girl decided to describe to the guy a modern phone and its functions, but as expected, he found her behavior strange and did not believe her words. Not understanding what books she was reading to talk about such things, Minuette herself realized that this was hard to believe, so she decided that her husband should not make her believe it. As expected, Onyx confirmed her words that he wasn't going to believe it. In the end, the girl decided to just tell him it like a story from a book about her life. From time to time, the man interrupted her, clarifying some details. The girl was so engrossed in her story that she didn't even notice that part of her story was really hard to believe. The man didn't want to openly say that he didn't believe her story, so he explained that he was listening to her carefully. The girl continued to tell him that she worked as a designer, and the man finally understood why she was so fascinated by the Countess's garden. The girl's praise for his sharp mind made the man blush. Looking to the side, Minuette noticed another girl galloping boldly on horseback, a sight that seemed unexpected to her, as she believed she lived in a conservative world. Horseback riding seemed like an almost unattainable dream to her, because she couldn't even step outside the house without her mother's permission. She immediately smiled, thinking that if it weren't for him, she would have stayed home today. But it was for his sake that she dared to go to the city. The man asked again, because her family's estate was so large that she could afford to ride horses even within its boundaries. She explained that there was nothing funny about it, and besides, the mother wouldn't allow it anyway because she thought her daughter might faint at any moment. Her words made him think that she had a specific place she really wanted to visit. The girl noted that her family has enough money, but no wealth can completely replace freedom. The man was amused by her contradiction, because just a moment ago she had been thinking about wealth, which made her happy, and now she was talking about freedom. Therefore, he openly called her greedy, noting that if you want to keep everything in your hands, you will have to sacrifice something, and not all the riches of the world belong to her family. The girl was about to answer, but suddenly realized that she had a much more interesting offer. She asked if he would like to be her riding instructor. The man had guessed from the very beginning of their meeting that a day with this talkative girl would not be easy. In the evening, Minuette went to bed and thought for a long time about today's meeting with her lover. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined his face. She was pleased to think that he had taken her words with complete seriousness. With these thoughts, tired from the day's events, she eventually fell asleep. And even in her dreams, she dreamed of him becoming her riding mentor. The next morning, the maid immediately rushed to look for the lady, not understanding where she could have disappeared to so early. Since Minuette visited the Countess's palace, the peace and tranquility in their family had disappeared, but the woman accepted these changes with strange joy. And this time was no exception, because as soon as she finished her afternoon tea, an excited girl burst into the room. She was in a hurry to report the news that their garden had even been written about in the newspaper. Calmly placing her cup on the table, the woman remarked that the empire had always lived in the shadow of sadness, and when she returned, she was not going to put up with the previous silence. But looking at the girl, she wondered why her steps were so careless. If she continued to behave like a normal duchess, she would never again associate with those who did not follow the rules of nobility. But even despite this, the woman did not stop liking the girl. She simply could not give up this cute child. While reading the newspaper, the woman made her own conclusion about Minuette, and looking at her sincere face, she decided not to reproach her anymore. Although she did not recognize these vulgar newspapers, the woman still saw with her own eyes the beauty of their garden. After that, they started reading together about a mysterious garden designer who no one had ever seen. Minuette had always received harsh criticism, but for the first time, she felt warmth reading these lines. Unfortunately, her name was not listed as the decorator, but they didn't need that, because everyone in the palace knew exactly who they owed such a luxurious garden to. The girl was pleasantly surprised by these words, but she was even more eager to hear them from one person. The maid remarked that if no one knew who created the garden, then higher circles would certainly be interested in this person. Even Violetta praised her efforts, saying that her talent was far above the level of cheap newspapers. Despite her love of etiquette, the woman herself did not notice how the maids and the girl became the closest people to her. Upon learning that she had not had a debut ball, she suggested replacing it with a tea party with influential guests. Handing the letter to the surprised girl, she added that if it was her party, all the newspapers would write about it. So the girl, who was not yet accustomed to social life, had to quickly master the basics of etiquette. She read until her sister appeared at the door. Incredibly beautiful, a true debut queen. The girl admitted that this was her first tea party, so she tried to familiarize herself with the rules. Lillian knew this, but still asked not to embarrass her by bringing the book to the reception. That girl herself doubted whether she could handle such complex and confusing etiquette. The sister reminded them that it was time to pack up because they might be late for her party. The tea party took place in a garden that resembled a ballroom that seemed to have been moved into the open air. Covering her face with a fan, Lillian whispered to her sister who was who among the guests. Meanwhile, the hostesses reported that Onyx had decided to visit the old woman, so she decided to give him some time. Otherwise, it would have looked too rude on her part. She said she would be back soon and invited the lady to enjoy tea in the beautiful garden. Her grandson was indeed waiting for her outside. Without even saying hello, she said that Minuette was in the garden now and asked if he would come up to her. The man hinted that she might not know about their engagement, but the woman coldly replied that she was not deaf and had those who reported to her. Then he wondered if those reporting the news had mentioned that this might not be a cause for concern. He calmly added that if the engagement was broken, they could easily find another suitable party. The irritated woman reminded him that marriage should be based on trust and love. But Onyx replied that he was not a simple man, but a prince of an empire with financial difficulties. So for him, a wedding was, above all, a union. Of course, it would be unwise to miss the chance to intermarry with her family, although he is sure that the emperor will find another influential family. Violetta realized with bitterness that the crown had indeed changed her grandson, and perhaps not for the better. The man did not take her words as the truth, and calmly remarked that he had simply grown up. The woman nevertheless returned to her question, and asked again whether he was going to say hello to her or not. Smiling, the man explained that he had learned a strange thing. It turns out he had inadvertently hidden his true identity from her. The woman couldn't understand why he even needed to hide the identity of the royal prince. But later she realized that Lady Minuette didn't even know who the prince of her own country was. Meanwhile, everyone present admired the incredible beauty of the garden and asked each other if they knew the name of the designer. Minuette only smiled restrainedly and listened to the praise from the women who themselves dreamed of hiring such a decorator. Calmly wiping her lips, Lillian replied that the decorator was here, and she knew very well who he was. At this moment, one of the women noticed Lady Minuette's strange look on her. No one could believe that a girl who had been frail since childhood was able to do all this on her own. But she herself dispelled all the rumors and loudly declared that she personally chose every detail of this garden. Her sister immediately intervened and added that she didn't do the dirty work, such as the soil, but left it to the servants. Returning to her seat, the woman met Aegon on the way, who returned from the meeting earlier than expected. The discussion of importing magic stones concluded more quickly. Meanwhile, the man watched from the window as Minuette, who now looked like an ordinary lady, and calmly attended the tea ceremony. Feeling someone's head on his shoulder, he turned and almost collided with Aegon. Meanwhile, the woman finally returned, hoping she hadn't been away for too long. Minuette, trying to remember everything she had read about etiquette, diligently followed every rule. She did it quite clumsily, but that's considering it was her first attempt. Everything would have been great if her sister hadn't suddenly stepped on her foot. The sister silently made it clear that she was so nervous that she put the spoon on the saucer incorrectly. Meanwhile, both men were closely observing her manners and could not deny that they were rather mediocre. The man didn't understand who had taught her etiquette and how anyone dared to send a woman without basic knowledge to such a company. His assistant didn't see anything critical in this and calmly noted that it wasn't the end of the world. Smiling at his words, Onyx suddenly remembered the girl's request to teach her how to ride. Eventually, they stopped watching her, and the man asked about the results of today's meeting. What a relief he felt when he learned that the demand for magic stones was gradually increasing. Meanwhile, the women continued to admire the garden and kept repeating how beautiful it was. The girl was always pleased to hear this, and she sincerely thanked them for the compliments. Suddenly, she heard the voice of another girl who had been waiting for this meeting since the ball and was glad to see her again. Upon seeing Lady Cecilia, the girl bowed, while she mentally noted that if she were not related to Onyx, she would be the first to extend her hand to her. Despite the fact that this was only their second meeting, the girls remembered each other well. But their conversation was immediately interrupted by a jealous friend, who declared that Cecilia had been close to His Majesty since childhood. The woman was convinced that this girl would never become a princess, which is why she allowed herself to treat her this way. Meanwhile, Lady Cecilia was genuinely amazed by the magical transformation of the garden. But her friend intervened again and coldly corrected her that she was not a sorceress, but only a witch. The girls paid no attention to this, and Lady Cecilia decided to apologize for her disgraceful behavior at the ball. She admitted that she felt uncomfortable when others compared her to her, and she added that she now understands how unpleasant it could have been for her. Minuette decided to seize the moment and cautiously asked if she liked His Majesty. She was surprised by such a question, but replied that, like everyone else, she liked him. Hearing this, the girl directly asked if she was in love with him. After all, she noticed that the look becomes different when they talk about the person they love. Lady Cecilia frankly admitted that she really liked His Majesty. Then Minuette shared her secret that she had no intention of marrying His Majesty at all. With hope in her eyes, the interlocutor asked if this meant that she was not going to come between her and the prince. She replied that she would only support her. This greatly surprised the lady, who at first was not even happy about such an opportunity. After the tea party was over, the girl spent a long time in her room wondering who this girl really was, whether she was kind or dangerous. She remembered her words, that she had promised to support her if she managed to please the prince, but at the same time, she felt that she was far from simple and impossible to read through. With each thought, she clutched the sheets of paper with the title of the future article tighter, not knowing what to write about. After all, it was thanks to the articles in the newspaper that she could express her own opinion in a timely manner and not feel ashamed. Hearing that someone was about to come in, she quickly hid the letter blanks. A moment later, the maid reported that Aegon had come to see her. Cecilia immediately ordered the maid to take the envelopes to a gentleman. The man confidently sat down on the sofa and asked with a smile if she had just sent the love letters. She answered calmly, and without wasting time, asked if Onyx's business was doing well. He assured her that things were going quite well, and then asked if she had really been to the tea party. The girl sadly confirmed that, despite the fact that the prince had seen her, he had not said a word to her. Later, he remembered Lady Minuette, and the girl asked his opinion as to whether she could be trusted. After all, she herself didn't know who she really was, a frivolous woman, as the press wrote, or someone completely different. She added that if she wasn't so bad after all, then it could be discussed with His Majesty together. Aegon could not help but notice that she was much softer than she first appeared. The girl wondered if he wished she was as tough as she looked. In the end, she decided to find out for herself whether Minuette was a woman she could truly trust. And above all, she wanted to prove to Onyx that there was no better candidate for the role of princess in this empire than herself. Did you like the recap? Want a continuation? Write part 2 in the comments.